Thank you so much, Congressman. My name is Sarah McBride, and I am a proud transgender American.
Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host. And as you can see with me, I have a wonderful, wonderful person in the House. It is Senator Sarah McBride, who's running for the House. So that's an interesting thing. She is the highest elected transgender person in the country, perhaps in the world. I don't know about that, but definitely in the United States. And she will probably be the first, or most definitely be the first transgender person in the House in the U.S. Congress. So welcome to Khanversations, Senator McBride. How are you doing?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I love your confidence and optimism, and I'm doing really well. I'm even better now that I'm joining you.
Thank you very much. So I did a little bit of reading, and you have already garnered a lot of national attention, an article in New York Times, a television report on MSNBC. So I guess that should also be helping with the fundraising also. That should not be an issue. I was recently talking to a Delawarean politician and said, "Are you going to be running for Congress?" And said, "Oh my God, the grotesque amount of money that Sarah is going to raise is going to scare everybody away." So congratulations on that count, which actually is good news that says that you're very popular, not only in the state, but outside the state. But Sarah, why are you running for Congress?
Well, it's a great question. I'm running for Congress because, quite simply, I think government has to work better for workers and families, especially when hard times hit. I ran for the Delaware State Senate in large part because of my experience as a caregiver to my husband, Andy, during his battle with terminal cancer. And I saw just how critical health insurance was for Andy. I saw just how critical workplace and employment benefits were to him having the time to focus on trying to get better, and me having the time to care for him and to be there by his side, to love him through that serious and ultimately terminal illness. And I know how lucky we were, and I do not believe the support that we had through that incredibly human challenge. I don't believe that should be a matter of luck. And so I ran for the state Senate to try to change that. And I'm proud in my first term, I was able to pass paid family and medical leave, the largest expansion of the social safety net in modern state history, to do just that, to provide a little bit more support for workers and families through their inevitable life challenges. But at the end of the day, in order to meet the needs of families and workers up and down the state, we need federal action and federal investment. That's the only way we'll be able to keep our communities safe from gun violence. It's the only way we'll be able to truly protect access to the full range of healthcare needs that Delawareans have, including reproductive healthcare. It's truly the only way that we're going to have affordable early childhood education for every family up and down the state. And so I'm running for Congress to build on our progress and to make government work better for people who so desperately need it to.
When I was looking at your bio, obviously this bill is very well known about paid leave for family, taking care of your near and dear ones. But there's also talk about the gun legislation you worked on. Delaware is an open carry state. I have not seen anyone openly carrying a gun yet, thank God. But I don't understand, why is Delaware an open carry state, and what kind of legislations are we talking about when people can freely carry guns? They don't even have to be old enough to vote, but they can still shoot.
Yeah, Delaware has historically lagged other Democratic states in adopting common sense gun safety legislation. And I'm proud, though, over the last few years that the Delaware General Assembly has taken significant steps forward. And I've been a vocal champion of many of the major policies that we've advanced in the last 3 years. Just last month, I was able to pass through the state Senate legislation, finally making our schools gun-free zones. Up until just this past month, when we passed the legislation, it was entirely legal for an adult to walk into a school with a firearm. And there really wasn't anything that anyone could do about it. They had not broken any laws. That will change once the governor signs our bill into law. I was a vocal champion of the ban on assault weapons and the ban on high-capacity magazines. I also was proud to co-sponsor and support legislation reforming the gun dealer and gun manufacturer liability shield. These are the types of policies we should pass at the federal level, because in a small state like Delaware, as important as these state level policies are, you and I both know just how easy it is to drive to Pennsylvania on I-95. And without federal action, particularly on issues like the assault weapons ban, it's still far too easy to bring weapons of war into our state and potentially murder our neighbors. And so I believe that Congress has to prioritize these issues in the same way that we've taken on the NRA in the General Assembly and passed, in so doing, the most significant gun safety legislation in our state's history. But there's still more work to do. You obviously mentioned the issue of open carry, but truthfully, I think the most important gun safety legislation we could pass in Delaware is a permit to purchase bill. We've passed it in the Delaware State Senate. The new speaker, Val Longhurst, I'm thrilled to say, is committed to passing it in the House come January. And this is legislation that would say, if you are going to purchase a handgun here in Delaware, you have to go through training. Because ultimately, we know that policies like permit to purchase save lives. They prevent suicides. They ensure that people know how to operate a gun when they get one. And they help to stop straw purchases from occurring, which is one of the main reasons we see so many guns proliferate on our streets across the state, but including in my home city of Wilmington.
If you recall, we worked. Well, I didn't do much of the work. You did all the work on the religion bill that you passed. And I was looking for it because I want to share that message that you sent me. And I remembered that after I agreed to speak with you and then we spoke on the phone, I didn't think twice about that law because I said, oh, this is Delaware, it will pass. So given the fact that this is a very blue state, I'm all dressed in blue, as you can see. So this is a blue state. I think there are double the number of Democrats than Republicans in Delaware. So it's easy to a great extent to be a Democratic politician in Delaware. Are you ready for Washington? That is like an entirely different place. Are you ready to up the game, or you think you're ready to go and deal with, can you imagine dealing with Kevin McCarthy on a daily basis?
Yeah, no, look, your point is well taken. DC is not Delaware. And frankly, if DC was a little bit more like Delaware, things would be better for all of us. But the reality is that there are some Republicans in Washington who will not work with any Democrat. But the reality is that when I got elected in 2020, there were people who thought I never would be able to work with Republicans. And yet in the time since my first election, almost every bill that I have passed has passed with bipartisan majorities, including major Democratic priorities like paid family and medical leave. It's certainly a taller order to reach bipartisan common ground in the U.S. Congress, but I do believe that there are many issues where we can find common ground, issues that we've seen the president already find common ground on, from infrastructure to gun safety to support for Ukraine against the Russian invasion. There are issues where Democrats and Republicans can work together. And I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and talk with anyone who's willing to come to the table to try to advance policies that help their constituents. We're not going to agree on most things. There might be some politicians I can't agree with on any issue. But I believe that the best way to affirm a person's dignity is to at least let them be heard and seen. And that's how I've operated in the Delaware General Assembly. It's how I'll operate in Congress. Hold firm on our values, but always be willing to have conversations, as I join a program called Khanversations. And I think that that's important, because ultimately the only way for democracy to work is for us to be willing to have a shared conversation with people who disagree with us. If that doesn't happen, you're never going to be able to get things done. And beyond that, we actually then run the risk of government grinding to a halt in a way that undermines the health of our democracy here at home and globally.
With Senator Carper retiring after decades and decades of service to the country as well as to the state, now the legislator in chief is going to be Senator Coons, who in Washington is known as the Democrats all Republicans love. So I guess we are entering an era, I guess, where people from Delaware at least are willing to work with the other side. I want to draw your attention to uh, Colin Powell, who was the Secretary of State and Joint Chiefs. A lot of people say that perhaps he was the best president we never had. He was probably the best president we never had. A lot of people liked him. Even though I've been a Democrat all my life, I really admired Colin Powell a great deal. They say the reason why he never ran for office, I mean, there are two theories. One, there must have been something in his closet, but the other one was his identity. And his wife was afraid that he would be assassinated because he was Black, and she felt that perhaps America was not ready. So identity is an important case, but in your case, it seems to be the exact opposite. Is your identity one of the most compelling motivators of your engagement with politics as an open, highly recognized, and highly active transgender person? Is your identity playing a role in your campaigns and your motivation to be more and more involved in the politics of our country, Sarah?
Sure, that's a great question. Look, I think all of us, when we enter any conversation, whether we're talking among neighbors, whether we're entering a conversation around a table as members of Congress, all of us bring the totality of our life experience to the table. And certainly that includes my trans identity for me. My trans identity has resulted in me knowing what it feels like to be unseen and unheard, and unfortunately today outrightly attacked by my own government. But it's also an experience that has shown me incredible joy and hope and community, and more than that, change that I have witnessed over the last decade that I thought when I first came out would never come. And so it's left me very optimistic that seemingly impossible change is not only possible, but if we work for it and fight for it, ultimately inevitable. And so it's certainly a part of who I am. And diversity in government is not a luxury. It is a necessity to craft effective solutions for a diverse country. And as they say, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And so it certainly influences who I am. It certainly impacts my life experience, but it's just one part of who I am. Earlier on in this conversation, I talked about my experience as a caregiver to my husband, Andy. That was the most formative experience of my life, not my gender, my relationship and my role as his caregiver through cancer. In the Delaware State Senate, I'm working on a myriad of issues, from healthcare to education to workplace benefits, to, as you mentioned, truly moving forward religious pluralism and freedom in our state for all people of every faith and no faith at all. And so I think it's important for people to understand that I'm not running to be the transgender member of Congress. I'm running to be Delaware's member of Congress who's focused on all of the issues that matter. But that truly, for democracy to work, it has to include all of our voices. And I believe here in Delaware, we can show a lot of young people here in this state and across the country that the heart of our country is big enough to love them too, that they can live their truth and dream big dreams all at the same time. And what I've seen through voters is that people here in Delaware are fair-minded, and they are judging candidates based on their ideas and not their identities.
A couple of days ago, I was chatting with one of my colleagues from the political science department at the University of Delaware, and I was telling him that I'm going to be interviewing Sarah McBride on my show, and I had decided that I would just not talk about your identity at all. I'll just treat you like any other politician, talk about what your achievements are in Delaware and what you want to achieve once you go to Congress. Then I realized that Congress doesn't do much anyway. So let's not waste time talking about that. But then I started thinking about Hillary Clinton. And I realized that perhaps one of the reasons why Hillary Clinton may have lost 2016, there are many reasons, is because there were some on the left who were more eager to have the first female president in the United States, first woman president of the United States, than talking about the fact that she was vastly more competent than the person she lost to, right? I mean, her achievements are significant as a senator, as a secretary of state, and she has contributed to the country. So, from your point of view, is the fact that every time I look for some information on you, whether it's on TV, whether it's in news, everyone is talking about you as potentially the first transgender person in the Congress. Is that a distraction? Does it bother you? And would you like people to focus more on your politics, your ideas, your policies?
Well, I knew when I ran for this that the media would focus on my identity, and I get it, right? This would be a first. This would be groundbreaking. This would send an important message to young people who are struggling right now, who are feeling alone and who are feeling frightened and attacked by their government. And that's an important message to send. So it's not completely irrelevant. But I do hope that people are also able to see that I am a multidimensional human being, that I am running because I believe that we need thoughtful and effective leaders in Washington to make government work better for people so that we don't give up on the capacity for our federal government to make change and improve the lives of Delawareans. And I'm running as someone who has actually delivered on all of the issues that voters are talking to me about, from caregiving to healthcare to education to housing to gun safety to abortion rights. And so it is my hope that as this coverage has occurred, as these headlines pop about my identity, that within those stories, I'm able to convey the record of results that I'm running on and all of the priorities that I'll work on in Congress. I will say, you mentioned Colin Powell, and it's an interesting one. It's an interesting example to bring up, because it actually it was on my mind as I was deciding whether to do this. And I love what I'm doing right now. I love the state Senate. I love the people I'm working with. I love the opportunities for progress that we have before us. I love the issues I get to roll up my sleeves and dig in on.
Yeah, but you're not running into Ted Cruz in the corridors.
Well, that's true. And that's a positive of staying in the state Senate. You're absolutely right. And then there are reasons that I really wanted to run for Congress, right? Feeling like this was the place where my voice was necessary. Feeling like I had something to contribute. Feeling like if all of us who are committed to progress opt out of going to Washington, then we're going to get the Congress that we unfortunately deserve, because it's going to be just people who want to play politics rather than make progress. And so, as I was thinking about this, these different dynamics were at play. But one thing that was on my mind too was safety. And you mentioned that Colin Powell quote, and I think it's a really apt one, because that is, I think, the reason why he did not run. His wife Alma was fearful it would result in an attack on him, a violent attack on him. And for me, I thought about that, because the discourse right now is incredibly cruel in our politics writ large, and it's particularly cruel and dehumanizing about people like me. And when cruel and dehumanizing rhetoric is normalized, we know that then violence becomes more possible.
It follows. It follows.
It does. It follows directly in its wake. Absolutely. And so there was a part of me that was scared to do this for that reason. But then at the end of the day, I thought, if I don't do this, and if that is the reason why I don't do this, then those people have effectively capped how people like me can participate in democracy. And I am not willing to let them win. I am not willing to let them say, you can live here, maybe, but you definitely can't run for office because we'll intimidate you into silence. I couldn't let that be the case. And so, that safety was on my mind. And so to the degree that my trans identity impacted my decision to run, it was in part saying, I can't let these people win. I can't let them intimidate me into silence or into refusing opportunities for the full diversity of our country to be represented at the table at every level of government. And so it did factor in, but not in the way that I think they would have hoped.
I want to ask you a little bit about your foreign policy. For the first time, I mean, I've seen you. You've been in politics even before you ran for the Senate, and I saw Jack Markell's speech praising you significantly. But in the Congress, there will also be foreign policy issues discussed. So where are you on foreign policy? Do you have any specific issues that you would like to address on the foreign policy side of politics, or you would be primarily leaving that to others while you concentrate on basically domestic kitchen table issues, right? That's your main agenda.
So certainly my main agenda and the issues that motivate me, the top issues that motivate me are kitchen table issues, as you mentioned, the day-to-day needs of constituents here in Delaware. But of course, Congress has an important role to play in foreign policy. And I think right now, one of the most important issues that we face in the world today is the fragile state of democracy. We have seen in places where we thought democracy was a settled subject, a backsliding in places like Hungary and Poland. We obviously see in Ukraine an authoritarian regime invading an increasingly democratic nation that was just seeking to exercise its own autonomy and self-determination. We see democracy under attack. And the United States has an important role to play in fostering democracy, in ensuring that human rights are a reality across the world, and there is no human right more foundational than the ability, the agency to determine your community's own destiny. And I think, unfortunately, during the 4 years of the Trump administration and the 8 years of the Bush administration, we saw the credibility of the United States and the role of the United States around the world in appropriately and effectively promoting democracy undermined. We saw it undermined with the Iraq War, and we've certainly seen it undermined by Donald Trump, who praised authoritarian regimes and painted himself as a strongman of sorts here in the United States, fomenting an insurrection on January 6th. And so the United States being able to reclaim its rightful role as a beacon for democracy, to utilize its leverage to support democracies around the world effectively, and to ensure that the 21st century is a century of growing democracy and opportunity for all, because I truly believe that liberal democracy, while not perfect, is the best way to ensure that people's rights are protected, their safety is secured, and their opportunity is empowered. And so I think that's the biggest issue internationally, and I think the United States needs to be a leader in that space.
We also need to lead with example. Right now, democracy at home is also in jeopardy and at risk.
Exactly.
You're kind of Delaware political royalty, sir. I mean, you wrote a book which the foreword was written by President Joe Biden. Do you expect President Biden to endorse you?
I mean, well, first off, I would certainly be honored. But, I know he's running for re-election and probably focused on his own race. I'm proud.
Well, you can exchange endorsements,
Yeah, well, I'm certainly supporting him for re-election. I'm certainly proud to support Delaware's own Joe Biden as he runs again in 2024. I think he's been an exceptional president who's proven, actually, that despite the cynicism that exists, that we can actually work together and get things done, like he did on gun safety, like he's done on infrastructure, like he's done on climate change. like he's done on so many issues that many thought he would never be able to advance the ball on. But I'm proud to call him a friend and an ally. It was surreal to have him write the foreword to my book. Bo, his late son, was a close friend of mine and a political mentor. And I've been thinking about Bo a lot as I've embarked on this journey. But I'm sure he's got his hands full running for re-election, and I'm excited to support him as he seeks a second term.
You could ask one of your interns to take out all the nice things he said about you in the introduction to your book, and then plaster them all over the internet.
That's certainly out there. That's very true. That's very true.
So from a serious perspective, in terms of the fact that, do you think you can do more for Delaware sitting in the Congress than you could do here from the Delaware Senate? And what does Delaware need, in your view? Like, if you had the Aladdin's lamp and you had three wishes, that political wishes, what would you wish for Delaware? What three things you think Delaware really needs?
Well, yes, I think I can do even more for Delaware in the U.S. House of Representatives. Look, I think Delaware's next member of Congress has to be someone with a proven track record of delivering real results on all of the issues that matter to people. And that's exactly what I've done throughout my career. I've taken on some of the biggest challenges facing our state and have delivered change that many at the outset thought would never come. And, making government work better for people at the federal level is a tall order. But as I said before, if we all opt out, if we all say it's just too far gone, politics is just too broken, we can't do big things, then we're not only giving up on ourselves, we're giving up on our future and our democracy. And I'm not willing to do that. And so we need to elect people who know how to get things done and who've demonstrated they know how to get things done. I think that when it comes to priorities, there are three things that I think we should make sure that we are advancing at the federal level, that Delawareans need us to advance. The first are the components of what was called the Build Back Better Act that fell out. So these components are paid family and medical leave, early childhood education, home and elder care, housing funding, the investments in our care economy that unfortunately didn't make it through in 2022. We need to pick that up and pass that. Delawareans need that support. They need that investment. And the only way for us to, like I said, guarantee everyone has affordable early childhood education, really the most practical way to do that is for the federal government to invest in that type of cradle through career support system. The second thing is gun safety. We need Congress to act, particularly as a small state, for the reasons I mentioned before. It's just too easy to bring weapons of war across state lines when we have a small state. And then I think the third is that we have to make healthcare accessible and affordable for every Delawarean. That includes healthcare like vision and dental through expansion of Medicare. That means protecting the full range of healthcare needs that people have, including abortion care. It means at minimum a public option, if not further, to make sure that people who are not yet Medicare eligible or don't qualify for Medicaid have a truly affordable option on the individual marketplace. And ultimately, our goal must be universal coverage. I think it's not only long overdue, it's an urgent moral necessity. And there are many ways that we can achieve that. But I think those are the three issues that we need to advance: investments in our care economy, gun safety, and broader healthcare efforts.
You've done your homework. You're not going to lose a debate. That is quite apparent. Sarah, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the agenda of the Republican Party, and this is probably the last theme that I want to cover. So they have, wherever they seem to be successful, or at least seem to be making a lot of noise, there are two areas in which they are doing it. One is that they have taken the LGBTQ issue, which I think is a state of being, and tried to convince people that it is an ideology. Mm-hmm. So for some reason, it is a choice. And so there is an ideology to promote this agenda. And that is creating a certain fear of the loss of quote unquote traditional America and traditional America, Judeo-Christian values, etc. So this is one thing they have tried to do, is to create the fact to attack the LGBTQ issue as an ideology. The second thing that they have done, and you must have recently heard Nikki Haley say that wokeism is more dangerous than any pandemic. I saw several jokes, people saying, "I know people who died of COVID, but not of wokeism, or had to stay at home for months because of COVID, but not." So, but they have tried to show that all the issues where we are trying to culturally progress are ideologically motivated, and you're going to get a lot of that in Washington, D.C. Do you have something to say about it, or you?
Sure. So I think we've talked about their attacks on the LGBTQ community, that I just think they ring hollow with voters, because they're an disingenuous attempt to try to distract from their policy failures over the last 3 decades, and the fact that they have no agenda for people in our state and in our country to really address the issues that are keeping them up at night. I think more broadly on the issue of wokeness, my first question would be, what do they actually mean when they say woke?
Yeah.
Every time you probe this with these types of politicians, they crumble, because when they talk about wokeness, they are either talking about something that is not actually happening, right? Ridiculous examples that they fabricate as
critical race theory being taught to primary schools and stuff.
Right, or they're just talking about simple kindness.
Oh.
And so, they're either making things up, or what they are actually offended by are things that, when you boil it down, when you take the ideological and partisan language away from it, they're just attacking kindness. They're just attacking the golden rule. And I'm a big believer in what I call the politics of Mr. Rogers. I think one of the things that's beautiful about Delaware is that we are a state of neighbors. And I think in our state, we have this capacity to take issues and to remove the language we see on cable news, to remove the language we see on Twitter that's so often abstract, that's so often partisan and overly ideological, and instead frame the issues around basic human kindness and decency, around those neighborly values, our duty to care, how you would want to treat the person who lives next door to you, how you'd want your child to be treated. And when we're able to break through what seems abstract to too many people and really root it in day-to-day human values, I truly believe that not only do we expose these right-wing attacks for what they are, which is just hatred and vitriol, but we also help to lay the foundation for those values and those policies to be successful, to pass in legislatures, for hearts and minds to open. Because at the end of the day, that's what these policies, that's what these values are about. It's about how we treat one another as people, with dignity, with respect, with fairness.
Sarah McBride, you're a beautiful person, both inside and outside. And I hope, for the sake of our state in Delaware and for the sake of our country, that you go to Washington. Thank you very much for coming and talking to me and to my viewers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've really loved this conversation.
Thank you very much.